Hey everybody, Larry Lawton here. Do I have a great video for you today? I'm going to explain what a halfway house is, what it's used for, and does it work or doesn't it work. A lot of people, even from other countries, ask me, what's a halfway house? But before I get started, always check us out on YouTube member programs. Please check us out on the Patreon member programs. We have a bunch of different levels. Also, check out merch out. We have merch in the store. Check out my book right here in the links below. Now, let's get into a halfway house. What is a halfway house? Why is a halfway house used in the system? The original reason for a halfway house is to transition a person from a stay in prison back into society in a better way. Instead of just opening the door and let him out, and say, okay, go home, you're done. It used to be where the more time you did, the more halfway house you did. But really now, it's just part of the prison system. And they don't do what they're supposed to do. Let me explain what I mean by that. First of all, logistically, a halfway house, it's like a prison. They're usually run by organizations like the Salvation Army or Goodwill Industries. I was in one that was called Goodwill Industries. They're not a prison per se. The people in them are not guards. They're hired. They work for, like I said, Salvation Army or Goodwill Industries or whatever company runs the halfway houses. In fact, my father-in-law used to work in a halfway house down in South Florida, and he was a cool dude, and he just worked there for a little bit, and he used to let them do what they want pretty much. And a halfway house is funny because it's supposed to be transitional housing, so you can get out of prison, go there, be confined, because it's very important, because you get out of prison, you have what they call sensory overload. I did. I would have killed somebody if I didn't go to a halfway house. If you let me out of prison and just gave me an apartment somewhere or whatever, it reminded me of that scene in Shawshank Redemption. The old man, he went out and he got out, he was in prison for like 50 years. He gets out of prison, he can't make it, and they just put him in an apartment. He ends up hanging himself. But anyway, a halfway house is supposed to be a transitional housing. Now, when you get into the halfway house, you get out of prison. Now, they'll give you a bus ticket, and they only give you a certain amount of time to get there. It's like, if you got picked up by relatives, they'd say you can get picked up by relatives, but you have to be in the halfway house in 24 hours. They figure out the time. So it's not you're free yet. You are not a free human being yet because you're in a halfway house. Now you're going to get on a bus. Like Larry Lawton got out of prison in Forest City, Arkansas, and got on a bus, and I was sent to a halfway house in Tampa, Florida. It was a Goodwill Industries. I was so fucked up when I got there because I was not ready to be a free man, and I actually went out in the free world. I'm lucky I had my cousin. If I didn't have my cousin, I'd be a dead man. And it's just the way it is. I mean, I would have killed somebody or went back to prison or something, or didn't care if I got shot or did whatever it was. But when I got back into the halfway house, now you get to the halfway house, now they know you're coming. If you don't get there, they have to report you missing, and then they put out a warrant for you, and you are back in prison. So it's not like you're free. It's not like, oh, you got a taste of freedom. That's not how it works. So what happens is you go to prison, you do your time. Let's say they say you have 10 years. Well, when you're at 9 years, they might give you 6-month halfway house, they call it. So at 6 months, you end up still not doing your time because it's still considered your time. You get to the halfway house, and they literally, in my place, they had an entrance where they had a guy in a booth, like a guard, and you had to go through. They gave you a piss test. They searched you. They searched all your possessions. You're not allowed to have certain things. But then when you get into the halfway house, we had a mixed halfway house, meaning we had men and women. Now, they didn't sleep together. I slept in a dorm room, if you want to call it. We had 6 beds and our own shower in that halfway house. Now, you could come out of your room, that little room area, and then there's a kitchen, and there's like a TV room. Back then we had one computer. It was an old computer. This is now 2007. But they had a computer. You can go online and try to learn, but they wouldn't let you do anything you wanted. So you do have rules. You had to clean. You had to do certain other things. You had orderly jobs. And in a halfway house, you got to go out and get a job. a real job. Now, in the halfway house I was in, they got you a job. You guys are gonna love this one. They got me a job, and they got all of us a job. It was a call center, and we were actually working for Verizon. So all of these ex-cons are on the phone, calling it auto dials, and they call the customers, and you ask them if they want to renew their Verizon. Some say yay, some say no, all that stuff, and you just keep calling. This is your job. And I used to laugh. I'd say, we're getting all this personal information, and even your last four, your social security number, the last four, your credit card, and all this, and they're giving it to these ex-cons. If these people on the other end of the phone ever knew who we were, they would have never gave it to us. But being in a halfway house, you had to get a job. That's the rules. You got to get a job. And the halfway house now takes 25% of your salary. So let's just say you make $200 for the week. Now this is before taxes. You get $200. The halfway house takes $50 of that, 25%, right off the top. Boom. Now you're paying the taxes on the $200. They don't give a shit. They're taking out of your gross, not your net. Also, the I used to say, I think I'd love to open up a halfway house. Because first of all, I could do a lot better job than they do, because they don't really help you reintegrate into society. They're only money-hungry people who want the money, because they get, the last time I checked, the halfway houses were getting $60 a day per inmate. And listen to this, they get 25% of the person's salary. Even better, the halfway house is now authorized to let you go what they call home confinement. So after, let's say I have 6 months halfway house, within 3 months, 2 months, I can go to home. I can go to my house and stay there and work out of that and call home confinement. And they'll monitor you, they'll check you at your house, they'll call, you're not allowed to go out. Still the same thing. You had to go to work, all that. But now, let's say the halfway house has 60 beds in it. I'm just giving a number. They might use that one bed, one of those 60, 3 times, and get $60 a person per head for the whole time. Even though I go home, the halfway house got my $60 a day that the federal government was giving the halfway house, and counting my 25%. Now listen, Larry Lawton, went home, so the bed that I came to from out of prison, another dude comes. Now I'm home. Within a month or two, that guy goes home, and he's paying, and he's being monitored at home, and another inmate comes there. And the better yet, they don't even have to feed you. You're going home, so you're gonna be fed by your family. Technically, you're in prison. A halfway house is a prison. It's just the minimum security prison you can get. They don't have guns, and you could easily walk away. You can not come home from work. They're gonna report you, and it's gonna be an escape charge. Now, not only are you going back to prison, you're getting more time. Now, halfway houses are like anything else. They're not run too swiftly. They don't pay these people too high. So I am in a halfway house in Tampa, Florida. I knew I wasn't going to live there in the Tampa area to get a job permanently, because you could start looking for a job. But I lived on the East Coast in the Melbourne, Florida area. But the closest halfway house was Tampa at the time. So I know I'm not going to get a job in Tampa, and I'm going to keep this job forever, because what am I going to do after the halfway house? I got to go back to my mom's house where I stayed, because I had nothing to go to. So I ended up going, and I didn't give a shit about the job. I just like to get out of the halfway house every day. They make you get a job. It was funny, but for the first week I was in there, 2 weeks I was in that halfway house, they let you go out and look for a job. What look for a job? I used to go, and they give you a bus pass, so you didn't have to pay. And you're really institutionalized. When you get out of prison, you can't even function. I couldn't function. I was a non-functioning human being. I remember I got on a bus. They give you a bus pass. And I don't know where I'm at. I'm in Tampa. I have no idea. I literally was feeling so uncomfortable that I actually sat up near the driver and I asked him what to do. Can you please tell me what stop to go to and stuff like that? Because I had no clue. And they get to know, I think. But I ended up liking riding the bus. I would ride the bus for all day long. Literally. Go all the way to its last stop where the guy sometimes got lunch, and stay on the bus and get all the way back to the end of the route. I just didn't care. I'm free. That to me was freedom. Remember, I was just incarcerated for a long time. I went away in 96. This is now 2007. So in this halfway house, it's like, wow, I'm doing great. I'm loving this. So mind you, you have to go to the halfway house. You have to work. It's a transition. It's supposed to be a transitional housing or transitional prison to get to the free world. You know, they were such morons. At that time, it was amazing because the halfway house didn't even let us have a phone. And we had to call in. So if you went for a job interview, you got to leave the halfway house, sign out. You get to where you're going and you have to call the prison or the halfway house prison and say, I'm here. They'd say, okay. And then when you leave, you go, I'm heading back now. And then get on the bus and get home. That was the check-in policies and private policy. And they'd violate you and maybe put you back in prison if you don't follow their rule. Well, it got harder and harder to find a payphone. Forget now. I can't even imagine if halfway houses don't give people phones. Or not just give them, let them have it. I didn't want them to give it. I think they do, because when Tellini got out, I got him a phone. When Paulie got out, I helped him. And when Paulie, and you can look at our video in the playlist, Paul Tellini did 27 years in prison. He had a 30-year sentence. When I was in, they didn't have phones. So what they would do was actually check you and search you if you had a phone. What does Larry do? Larry gets a phone. I ended up having a phone. I bought a phone at a store, and I ended up having a radio. I actually made a radio, and I'm going to show you this radio. So look at this. I ended up making this. Now this is a radio. It looks just, and this is what I used to have at the halfway house, because people, you know, listen, you don't have anything in prison. That's just what you don't have. I mean, in the halfway house either. It's not like you go buy a boom box or whatever. You could have a radio. Wouldn't let you have a boom box or something like that, and you're not going to carry it around anyway. So I had this. Looks like a radio, right? Look at this. I took the guts out of this, and a cell phone would fit in here exactly. I would then put the cell phone in there. I would put this totally together. See, you could see it is exactly like, even the antenna came up. I would walk into the halfway house like I'm listening to the radio. Hey, there's a game on or some bullshit, and the guy would pat you down. He wouldn't. And now, even the weight of this felt like a radio because it had the phone in it. I always made sure I shut the phone off because you don't want it going off. And I would come in and I would be like, I'm listening to radio, and they'd come out, oh, hold on, and I'd shut it off. You can't shut it off. And guy would see all that, think, oh, okay, he's got his radio, and then I'd put the radio down and I'd get searched and all this kind of shit, pick my radio up. They've even given me the radio back, you know, and thinking it's a radio, but the way, and it didn't move. It was such a clever thing, I gotta say that. But anyway, that's what I did to use a phone, and I only used the phone when I was out of the facility or in my room, because they didn't have guards shaking you down and ripping your cell or ripping your room apart. Now they didn't have that. They had the beds, and you had your little, you know, like a foot locker. You know, you actually started, that part of it was good, but they didn't help you, like, say, you know, even give you education. Why wouldn't you give us a class on how to use a phone? We were getting out, phones were somewhat new. Give us a class on how to use a phone. Give us a class on a computer. I didn't even know how to turn on a computer. That's how bad it was. I literally didn't know how to turn on a computer. It's just crazy, but that's the truth. So it was kind of weird in that regard. They don't give you help. They don't give a shit. They'd say, go get a job. You hope someone would show you how to at least get on a website they had for jobs, you know, like the unemployment. You did go get your license. That you did. You know, there were certain things when you got to the halfway house you had to do. One, you had to go get hygiene items. I was so institutionalized, it took me 4 hours to go get toothpaste, toothbrush, and dental floss. 4 hours. I was so fucked up. But when you get out of being institutionalized for a lot of years, you need a halfway house, a traditional housing, transitional housing, to try to adapt yourself back into society. Well, what really happened was worse. They opened up a brand new halfway house in Orlando, Florida, closer to my home in the Melbourne area and Brevard County. So they said, okay, they put all the people who lived close on that area, and they were getting transferred to this new, brand new facility. Oh, brand new. But what a bunch of dicks. And boy, talk about not knowing how to run a prison. Now, I just was in the halfway house in Tampa for a few months. And I loved it. I got in a groove. I was getting laid. I figured my phone out. Not that I didn't bring my phone. Did everything. Had everything done. They transferred me to this place. And it was so fucked up. The guys thought I was back in prison. They treated us so bad. Like we were like pieces of shit. And we're older guys. And I just did freaking over a decade in prison. You're going to talk to me like I'm some kind of punk? And they had about a 28-year-old kid running this facility. And I got fed up one day and I said, you fucking talk to me like that, I'll fucking kill you, motherfucker. And I threatened him. And he got scared. He ran into the office. He calls the marshals. The marshals come and get me and put me back in prison. Ended up going back to Coleman. It was like old home week. But I ended up going back to Coleman prison. And I look back at that and I go, what jerk-offs? You know, if they really want to run halfway houses right, they should get an ex-con like myself or somebody like that to show them how to run these things. Because you can't know what's going through a man's head unless you've been there. And that's what really integration into society is about. I have a whole plan to help people reintegrate into society. It's just, I hope they let us do it. I hope they let me do it. But anyway, that's what a halfway house is. Logistically, it's a facility, and it's not, it could be a house, it could be a big house, it could be like a building that was converted into rooms and bathrooms, like a mini hotel. Call it like that, a mini hotel. And logistically, you have to go there from the actual confinement to reintegrate back into society. And they're supposed to let the rules go, you know, less and less as the longer you're closer you're getting to the door, so when you get out in society you're not in shock. Sadly, they don't do that, but they do at least get you at least away from the wall, so you did actually have fresh air, if you want to call it. I used to call it, but they're nothing but a money grab, and that's how the money worked too. It's just another prison that the system uses. It's really what it is, and they know you're not going to fuck up, because do you want to go back to prison or even get more time for an escape charge? Of course not. Anyway, I hope you learned what a halfway house is. I hope that helped you. I hope you understand my saying right here. It's one of my greatest shirts. It's in our merch. I don't believe in bad people. I believe in bad choices. And that's my saying, and I love that saying. Well, I want you to make good choices. Enjoy your freedom. Turn on the TV. Go to your refrigerator tonight and say, you know what? I'm free no matter how rough it is out there. Have a great day, everybody. A lot of love, a lot of respect. Me to you.